So this is going to be my video on how to insulate and frame the floor for your camper van. Obviously there's thousands of videos out there, but I didn't see one specifically on a Ford Transit like this one. And a lot of the videos kind of gloss over it and do it very quickly. So in this video, I'm going to take my time learning how to do it and take my time showing and explaining to you guys how and why I've done it.
First of all, a quick clean because we're going to be gluing some wood to this floor a little bit later on in the video.
I'm going with that solid foam insulation board, that 25mm stuff, and then some 25mm wood from a lumberyard to frame it out, and then it should give a nice solid floor. One thing I have questioned a lot is why people put beams on these ridges here. So if I put the beams on the floor, I'm actually gaining like a centimetre in height, but then it's really hard to match up the foam board. So I'm just doing it this way. Don't know if it's right or wrong. So 25mm wood on these raised parts, matched up with 25mm insulation, and hopefully this one goes smoothly. I'm just gonna lay out my basic framework to kind of work out where I think it's gonna go. Okay, so straight away there's a few issues that I've got to fix. The first one is this step here. Now, if the insulation board is gonna be laying across these ridge things, that's fine. But when you get to this step area here, there's no more ridges left, which is gonna put uneven pressure on it. I'm gonna have to come up with a way that makes sure that doesn't move around, bounce around with the weight of it, because it could probably split it in the end, I don't know. We'll look into it. The next one is these edge bits. So to make sure it doesn't move around, I wanted the woodwork to go right up to the edge. Then if the wood goes right up to the edge, it's not gonna be sat on one of those beams. And then at the back here, the ridge work is different than it is on the other side of the wheel well. So yeah, I think I'm gonna go get a tape measure and a pencil, start marking a few things up and try to work this out. Alright, so this is the way I've decided to do it. I'm gonna put this beam here on the ridges so it's level and just makes things easier. And on the back here, I'm just having one that goes all the way across so I can attach it. Alright, main three lengths are done. Now to stop it moving sideways, I'm going to put beams at different locations. I think kind of like one there. I'm going to put one around the wheel arch. Another one there. One there. So the bit I am going to struggle with is the step. I'm going to wait until the insulation's in and then plane the wood or trim it on a set table saw to match up. Then also put a thin layer of something underneath it to raise it up so it's not folding over that flap. Yeah, honestly, I still don't know. I'll make that up when I get to it.
So at this point, I started cutting the small middle beams. Now, because there's quite a few size anomalies in a van, I didn't measure and cut them all at the same time. So I cut all the small pieces for the first run and then pushed them like firmly into place. Then I measured the pieces for the next one and just carried on doing this for all 4 channels.
Oh god. Right, total rookie mistake. Never assume your wood is a standard length. I've just went to measure this up after getting onto the 3rd row of rails and it was off and I couldn't figure out why.
This is why right here.
It's like a massive difference. So all my beams across there, the short pieces that I cut, were exactly the same size. But then this bit here is miles out. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with how I've got this laid out now. I think I'm going to start gluing the main pieces down. Stick the beams down, I'm using grip fill by Evo Stick, looks good. Every job I try to do ends up taking longer. Doesn't even fit in the gun thing. I'm going to trim this down because I can't be asked going to the shop. And it'd be a waste of money as well. Press 1, adhesive thing, 0.
Honestly don't know how I messed this up so badly, but there was way too much glue, so I had to start like wiping off the excess. And then when I got to the back beam, I noticed that it wasn't lining up properly because the van isn't straight. It did line up with the wood when you put a bit of force on it, so my idea was get a load of weight, put the glue underneath it, and it should hold it in place. So I got as much stuff as possible to weigh the glued pieces down and make the best possible connection. Then at the back there, you can see I put the heaviest pallet I could find directly onto that beam that wasn't sitting down properly. Now whilst that was drying, it was time to start drilling pocket holes into the small pieces that fit in between. So I used a spare bit of L-shaped wood that I had as a brace, clamped the pocket hole bit and the piece of wood to that brace, and then also put another G-clamp on the side to make sure that pocket hole bit matched up perfectly with the piece of wood. Now it was 2 holes on each end, most of the pieces needed holes drilling on both ends, so here is a massive time lapse of me doing all that.
Quick lesson I've just learned. I bought these self-tapping screws and I should have been buying self-cutting screws. So I've done all these pocket holes and now I've got to go around with a drill doing a pilot hole, which is really awkward because it's deep and the drill bit's not long enough, and then screw these in. It's kind of working, but it's just adding a load more time. Alright, so another thing I've completely ruined. I've never used pocket holes before, but they seem like such a good idea. So I did a few tests, everything seemed alright, and when I've gone to install it, wood split in, and it's just not gone well. It's clearly because I've ruined it, so I'd definitely get a better jig. I would definitely get the right screws. If I don't get the right screws, I would get an extra long drill bit. But yeah, I think a bit more practice if I ever did this again. The other thing is, originally I was gonna layer the beams up offset because I was just gonna drill the screws straight through the bottom. But for some reason, I lined them up parallel, which I'd seen in a few videos. And if you do that, your pocket holes are gonna touch, like the screws that are going through them are gonna touch each other, which happened a few times as well. Insulating board. Gonna give this a quick test first to make sure it works. Got my ruler, knife, tape measure, hacksaw blade. Saw this in another video, makes sense when you're going through it. Obviously it's gonna go all the way through. Give this a go and see how it works out. Actually just scored it out with the knife and the blade and it seemed to work quite well. Time to cut through it, see what happens. First piece. I'm always bad at measuring. I don't know why I always mess these things up, but let's have a look. Sideways, seems alright. Again, I seem to be like a few millimeters out. Ah, maybe I cut it and maybe just put it in. That's kind of satisfying. It was like a few millimeters out, pushed on it and it's down. Woo! First piece of my floor's down. Exciting. Very exciting. So this kind of worked. As I was going through, I think I cut at an angle. Holding onto a blade wasn't nice either. I think I've got a tool that will let me, that has a handle for one of these. So I'm gonna try get that. I'm gonna try get a marker pen as well. And we'll get some more of this stuff done.
Now, as you can see here, I'm using a knife instead of a hacksaw. When I was scoring one of the boards earlier on, the knife accidentally dropped through and cut almost all the way through the board. So I decided to give it a go. Turns out it was really, really easy. So I switched out the hacksaw for the knife and then just carried on cutting through them.
I've just gone to put this one in. Fits pretty snug, but because the edges are a bit weird, it's come up with this shape, so before I put it all down properly, I'm gonna cut around those so they're nice and neat. So I'm just gonna take my time doing the rest of them, making sure they're spot on. Obviously around the wheel arches is gonna be quite tricky, so I'm gonna do the square pieces first. Right, now I've done an entire strip of flooring in the van. It's horrible. I mentioned it earlier when I was talking about the step, but the raised parts in a transit minibus aren't constant. They're not running all the way through. So on a lot of these pieces, when I go to put a bit of weight on them, they're dropping down. Now I know when the flooring's on top of it, that's going to spread the weight a lot, but still, I want these pieces of foam to be fully rigid.
To solve the problem, I used some offcuts from the foam board to go underneath to see if it would support it. This worked really well and supported the foam board evenly all the way across, stopping it bending and flexing on the unsupported areas. So I got a spare piece, grabbed my set square and went to work cutting some perfectly measured ridges to go under the rest of the foam boards.
Now that I've solved that problem, I'm going to cut as many of the boards as possible, and before putting them down, I'm going to go make some more of these insulated beams to support them. Alright, so that's all the square bits cut. Now before I install all these square bits, I'm going to cut some more of those supports I did earlier. And once those are done, I'm going to start measuring up the tricky areas. Got my little spacers. Going to try these, hopefully they add a bit of extra support to some of the boards that are already in. Next time I went to work on the van, I was greeted by this back piece coming loose because the glue was rubbish. So I'm going to have to find a way of attaching this properly before I carry on with the foam pieces at the back of the van here. So here we go, all the square pieces are in. Apparently that's the easy section, and that was really tricky. So next, going around the wheel arches. Instead of just doing one big piece around the wheel arch, I think I'm gonna do 2 pieces, or maybe 3 pieces. I don't know how important it is to have a solid piece around that area. Or do I split it with a piece of wood and then do 2 separate pieces anyway? As usual, I'm gonna make it up as I go along. All right, so I started by putting a straight piece in there, and then that just means I have to cut a section with a curve there, and a section with a curve over there. One thing I have noticed instantly is that there's no ridges on this section, so I've had to make more of these little foam supports to start off with, to go in there, so it sits down perfectly. So I've made a little card template, which is a bit rubbish. I have made this thing now. Because that's at an angle, there, I've actually cut that at an angle as well. And looks like it's going to go in perfectly. I just need to put some of those beams underneath to make sure it's supported properly. Nearly finished my insulation, decided to make some more framework for the step. Here it is. Obviously this corner bit I've had to make like a bracket thing. I finished attaching the end piece as well. Now when I was doing this though, I realised that the wood I've got, which I think was 35 by 41, turned sideways, was perfectly the right height. So I really fucking wish I'd done that from the start. Like it would be so much more stable and then there'd be less of these floaty areas that I've had to fix. So now I'm going to take these million spare pieces of insulation and bodge them together into one slab, because I'm not spending 30 quid on a massive piece of board that I'm not going to use. Right, got a load of wood, 12mm Malayan 12mm plyboard. Got 3 sheets that are 4 foot by 8 foot. Gonna put them all lengthways and then a small piece in the middle. Because they're massive pieces of wood, I've pulled up the van next to the house so I can get some power, so I can plug in and use the jigsaw. Again, these things are too big to get into my house and cut down, so I'm working in the van. That was supposed to be a time lapse of me cutting the wood, but obviously it was just a time lapse of the sky and the road. So I just want to quickly stop and say how amazing this wood is. It's beautiful, like the finish is awesome. I only started going to like the local timber yard 2 or 3 years ago. Before that I'd go to the big B&, whatever. Their plywood was never like really good quality all the way through. But because this is a camper van and I want it to last for years, spent a bit extra on this stuff at the local timber yard. But enough of my beautiful wood, let's carry on. So this next bit's gonna be a little bit tricky. After doing the insulation, I had to put the old floor back in the van just for something I was doing, and now I have the big new panels in the van. So I'm gonna have to take the new panels out, clear the van, take the old panels out, trace them, and then come back in the van and cut them. I might just keep my fingers crossed for decent weather and just try to get it done outside.
The old floor came out in 2 huge pieces, and as you can see, I didn't really have the space to lay it all out to trace round it, so I cut them down their centerfold first, then I cut them to the same size as my wood, making them much more accurate and a lot easier to trace. Very close to being done. Last piece now. Even though it's dead sunny, the temperature just dropped, so I think the rain is coming soon. Okay, so that's the boards for the floor cut. As you can see, I haven't put them in. That's because I still need to tape over the joints, making a full vapor barrier on the floor. But before I do that, one little tip is if you are doing this, do it all in one go. Don't do what I did, do the floor, bits of it, put your old floor back in, drive your van around for a couple of weeks. Just get it done in one shot. The reason is that I've potentially damaged a lot of this. So whilst I'm taping, I'm gonna have to check to make sure there's no holes anywhere. I know whilst I was cutting those shapes of the floor and testing them out, I have damaged the insulation on the wheel arches a bit. And I think I've split a few pieces of the foam too. So I did just give the floor a quick hoover before I do this. Now I am using this massive wide roll of foil. Earlier I did have the thinner stuff, but whilst I was choosing the foil, I realized that this stuff will just go one strip over it, so there's less messing around. It's also a much chunkier roll. Hopefully I've got enough. Okay, so it's a lot easier when you put it in straight lines. But one thing that's really bugging me is the fact that the foam isn't perfectly level with the wooden batons. The wood strips. Like, it's only a little bit off, and it's mainly when I step on it that it flexes, but that's really bugging me. And another problem I found, that glue I was using is terrible. Sticks anything to anything. All the wooden beams I've stuck down don't seem to have stuck. And the latest one is the step. I used G-clamps to make sure it wasn't going anywhere. I made sure there was the perfect amount of glue on there, and it's come loose. So before I finish taping that section, I'm gonna have to put a screw to connect it to the piece of wood at the end to make sure it doesn't move anywhere. Fun
part number 1, the wheel arches. Now, whilst I was doing that arch, I came up with a brilliant solution for a problem that I've been having with foil tape. And that is that when you're taping like the corner, try to pull the paper off from underneath, and because it's a corner like that, it tries to pull the paper up. So it just gets dead messy. But all I did was got my knife and then tried to cut the paper along the back. It's kind of tricky. I didn't think it was going to work. Hopefully, I should be able to peel one big line all the way down. Now that I've got one half, just fold that as much as I can. I'm just gonna stick that first bit on. There we go, nice and neat. Now this second bit is a little bit tricky. I hate peeling this stuff. Apart from that last section ripping, pretty amazing, because now you can just go all the way down into the corner, like so, and flatten it down. Next, the corner pieces. So for the corners, I have just been tearing off 1-inch strips, because if you try and get one piece around that corner, it's just gonna tear, not make a good seal, and then it's gonna poke holes in it. So stick that on there. There we go. I'm also just trying to give it a tiny bit of flexibility so that if that moves, it's not going to tear it. And then probably 1 or 2 more pieces around that corner. Then I'm going to use the same half technique to do the straight bit, and then this corner as well. It does go a lot smoother when you've got 2 hands and you're sat in the right position, so I'm going to crack on and get that done now.
I left quite a bit of space between the framework of the van and the wheel arches. In some cases, I might have left a bit too much space. The reason for this is so that the floor doesn't rub against the metal and cause squeaking noises. And in the case of the wheel arches, if you put it up too close, it's just going to rub on the insulation and eventually tear it away and rip it. But when I do my walls, the box section should hopefully cover all these areas, so you won't see them anyway.
A few quick little problems. I marked out where the beams were, but I think when the wood shifted, I've missed a few of them. So when I was drilling, as soon as I went through the board, you could feel it just instantly drop through, and I knew I was in the foam. That wasn't a huge problem. All I did is line up with the other ones that had made it in and just guesstimate the next hole. If you feel there's a tiny bit of resistance, then you've hit the wood. If you go into the foam, it's literally going to drop like there's nothing there. At the back edge here, I've left an overhang, and that's because it's not perfectly straight, so I'm gonna have to get a piece of wood and then shape it so it's perfectly matched up to it. At the front here, I've left like quite a big overhang. That's because I'm gonna get a swivel base, and I don't know how far it's gonna cut into this. So for now, I'm just gonna put some wood supports under so it doesn't snap, and then when I do get the swivel base, we will change it at that point. floor is finally done. Genuinely, if I had the money, I would rip it out right now and start again. When I was worried about the foam not being even, I've gone to put the floor down and now the floor just doesn't seem even. It seems like it's flexing in certain parts. I also should have planned out the sheets and made the wooden struts support it properly, because there's sections where it's not being supported and again it's flexing slightly. Now those were just my mistakes. But honestly, I wish I could take it all out, do it again. Because the ridges in the floor aren't constant, I can't see how you can make those foam boards sit perfectly at the right height. And the van's like, it's not perfectly straight. You'll see this in every video. So I just can't see a way of making it perfect, which means the floorboard is gonna flex in loads of different places. I did have one idea though. If you were gonna go for this method, I'd probably use expanding foam, a very small quick line of expanding foam, put the board on top, and that should fill the gaps so it doesn't flex.
Okay, so that's by far the biggest project I have done on the van so far, and the longest video, so I'm going to try and keep my summary as short as possible, and we'll just go over the parts that I got wrong and would improve in the future. So we will start off with the wooden batons. If you're using pocket holes, don't line them up like that, like I did, because when the screws go in, they have potential to touch each other, and if the screws are big enough, they might even push the wooden batons away from the floor. Try stagger them like that so they don't touch each other. Also, lay out your plyboard and design it properly before you even put the batons in, because you want some of the edges to actually rest on these, even if it's the far corners like that. You saw in my video that where the plyboard was meeting each other, it was flexing quite a bit. So I wish I'd actually lined this up underneath it so I could drill into the framework. In some sections, I wish I'd actually done it like that. So it would have been easier to line one piece there and then other piece on the other side like that. Foam boards, cutting through it. I started with a hacksaw blade, then I went to a bread knife. In the end, I started using a knife to cut through them, which is pretty good, but the knife I had was quite thin, it was quite flexible, it wasn't given a perfectly straight cut. So in future, I would probably use like 2, maybe 3 Stanley blades, glue them to a ruler so it's nice and solid, and then you should be able to just cut through in one go and get some nice, sharp, clean lines. Now when fitting the foam boards, if you're in a normal van, you shouldn't have this issue. From what I've seen in normal vans, the ridge work is perfectly straight and it's pretty much even all the way through. On a minibus, however, it just seems to be all over the place with massive spaces. So when you are ready to fit your foam boards, I would use a touch of expanding foam here and there. Not too much, because if you put too much on, it's going to raise the flooring, and then you've got another problem, which is taking the whole thing out and doing it again. But a little bit in the areas where it's not supported properly, push it down, and that should give you like tons of support and a tiny bit more insulation as well. So that's pretty much all the faults and problems that I made and will change next time. So hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll keep chipping away at this Campervan Mark 7 Transit minibus thing. See you next video!